My name is Cheryl Wiens. I'm a township resident, a laboratory scientist, the communications coordinator for the BC Greens of Langley, and most importantly, I'm a mom. As a scientist, I could speak to you today about all the scientific evidence on climate change and what it means for Langley. However, I feel that the motion you have in front of you already makes a very good evidence-based rationale for voting in favor of declaring a climate emergency this evening. Instead, I want to speak to you as a mother. On behalf of my 2-year-old daughter, I have my daughter's favorite book here with me today. It's called The Curious Garden. It tells the story of a boy named Liam who lives in a town without any trees or greenery of any kind. One day, Liam stumbles upon a lonely patch of plants. Liam knows the plants are dying, so he begins tending to them. Pretty soon, new plants and new gardeners are popping up everywhere. Eventually, the whole town is transformed. The township of Langley can be a beautiful place to live, but for the last 2 summers, my daughter has had to breathe wildfire smoke that research indicates can be like smoking 2 to 3 packs of cigarettes a day. And things are not expected to get better. Given the status quo, scientists predict that by 2100, the Fraser River in Langley will have risen at least 1.4 meters. Further demand will have been put on our already overused aquifers, and increasing summer heat combined with decreasing air quality will have caused a significant increase in respiratory and heat-related illnesses. I don't want that future for my daughter. The good news is that the IPCC has laid out a very clear action plan for the global community. The choice is whether we implement that plan or not. So this evening, I'm here to urge you to be like Liam, to take the lead in tending to what is left of our environment by declaring a climate emergency this evening and starting work to develop a carbon budget. You can help us to do our part to address climate change and inspire others in our global community. Together, we can avoid the worst consequences of climate change and ensure a sustainable future, not only for my daughter, but for her generation and all generations to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have a question from Councillor Richard.
I wonder, I've heard this expression a lot lately, this climate emergency.
Yes. Yeah.
And I look around and it doesn't really seem like it looks like an emergency.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering what exactly is meant by climate emergency,
Yeah.
and what will it specifically mean here in our community?
Yeah, okay. So there's a couple points to that question. So what is meant by the climate emergency? The first is to recognize the scale of the problem that we face. We have to get all of developed countries to turn around their energy systems in approximately 10 to 12 years, the IPCC says, to avoid the most catastrophic effects of climate change. That's not very long to completely transform our energy systems. And that means all levels of government need to understand how serious this is and work together to achieve that goal. We need to be at net zero carbon emissions by 2050. That's not long, and that's a huge change. And it requires the municipal governments as well as provincial, federal, all levels. And as a developed country, we have been some of the worst contributors to this problem, and that means we actually need to do more. So that's why it's an emergency, is because of the tight time frame and the scale of the change that's required and the consequences that will occur if we don't change our ways.
Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get what it means for me at a local level on a day-to-day basis. Does it mean I stop driving cars,
No.
or I only
No.
drive electric cars?
No.
Or?
No, it means we need to get together, first acknowledge the crisis. We need to look at what the scientists are telling us we need to do, which is curb our emissions, and then come up with ways that don't destroy everybody's lives and require them not to fly or drive everywhere. we're seeing electric vehicles, electric planes. I believe there's a company that's going to be flying Victoria with electric planes by 2020. So these things are not impossible, and we don't need to completely stop driving everywhere and walk everywhere. And you can't. I work in Abbotsford. I can't walk to Abbotsford for my job. That's not feasible. I'm not going to bike. Maybe if there was better bike infrastructure, but. There are options that exist, things that we can do if we take it seriously.
Thank you.
I'm sure you meant better bike infrastructure in Abbotsford. Just my comment.
The whole way.
Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you very much for coming. Actually, since it's the motion that I wrote and in considering it and trying to come up with in my own mind, and I do appreciate Councillor Richter's question and comments regarding, well, what constitutes an emergency? And one of the things that came to my mind is I recall in learning about, and sometimes just a simple graphic will really say a lot about what a situation is. And it was a picture of a big metal pot, and there was a frog in it with some water. And underneath it, somebody had lit the gas. And the frog at first was quite happy because the water was warming up and he was probably doing the backstroke and he was very happy. But, the gas, when you don't turn it off, eventually becomes too hot. And the frog was, quickly, becoming aware of its peril, but couldn't get out. So really the frog in the pot, at what point do we say to ourselves, this is an emergency? It's not something we've had to, I think, apprehend as a human species before, because this is very unprecedented. There may have been times when there were really severe climatic changes, but we don't understand what would have happened at that time. And, we're a very huge population with really at this point nowhere else to go. So I do appreciate that part. And, the sense of emergency, I think socially we generally use the word emergency if something's on fire. Like I need to jump out of the building because if I don't, I'm going to catch on fire. But in this sense, the emergency really is a challenge. And I don't know if there's a better word to use other than emergency, except to say, I think as you've correctly pointed out, the real emergency is the time frame, because we have been so inactive for so long. And we have created, in that sense, the emergency by not taking any action sooner. So it seems really dramatic and it seems precipitous, but that's really because the theory of global warming has been going on for 30 or 40 years. And through, collective inaction, here we are. So, but I really, totally appreciate your coming out tonight and your comments. And anything else you want to add?
Just that there's newspaper articles from 1906 that predict the phenomenon we know as global warming. So this is not new news. Big Oil has known about this for decades. Scientists have known about this for decades. It's an emergency because of inaction. So tonight we can change that. We can change the tide, and we can start taking action.
Thanks. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yes, thank you for coming today. Earlier in the conversation, you mentioned the words establishing a carbon budget. Can you just expand on what that would mean for the Township of Langley, what a carbon budget is?
Am I okay? Okay. So basically, the township has done a very good job of reducing their corporate emissions, but now we need to look at community emissions. So that means all of the residents in the Township of Langley and their carbon footprints, and how we can work as a government, at the government level, the municipal level, to reduce that. So whether that's having a tree protection bylaw, or investing in better cycling infrastructure, public transit, having people collect their rainwater, all kinds of things, all kinds of initiatives are going to be required to reduce retrofitting people's homes, for example. I know the province is working a lot on, starting to work on that with the Clean BC program. But I can't tell you exactly what it will look like at this point, but what we need to do is we need to figure out where are our emissions now and how much do we need to reduce them every year in order to get to net zero emissions by 2050. because that's what scientists say we need to do. It's not some crazy idea. It's just what we need to do to be able to survive for future generations as a species.
Hey, thank you very much.